once you submit that data collection, we would expect, again, reimbursement's gone down since the last reporting. We would expect that they'll get new data. There is a reduction cap for 15%. And then, Alex, I'm going to call on you, and I apologize, but can you, as far as through 2025, are we waiting for, once that data collection has been reviewed, we would expect them to reestablish their timeline of additional cuts past 2025?
That's correct.
Yep.
Right now, it kind of remains to be seen where we'll be going forward. Right now, the Protecting Access to Medicare Act, the text itself, only has the statutory reductions capped at 15% over each of the next 3 years following this reporting round.
Thank you.
Yep, that does remain to be seen. And I will just answer real quick. The recording for today's session will be emailed out to everyone after this event.
Thanks again, Alex. All right, so penalties. So again, it's imperative for us to say there is, per the PAMA, the regulation does allow for a penalty for non-reporting up to $10,000 per day per violation. So that could be pretty steep. At this point, our understanding, no labs were penalized for 2018 reporting. However, if this is a program they want to continue with, it is, again, I wouldn't be surprised if we would see that in the future, these penalties actually, be enforced. So it is, I would recommend at least attempting to do your due diligence and make your best attempt to submit. That way, you're not a guinea pig, so to speak. You're not called out from Medicare for non-compliance. We did want to kind of talk about NILA and the advocacy that they've shown as far as, again, trying to get this overhauled. And unfortunately, again, at this time, that hasn't been successful. However, really to just speak to, they're contending this initial survey, so the initial review, it leaned too heavily on the data submitted by the large independents such as Quest and LabCorp. So again, we saw the economies of scale with Quest and LabCorp within the last, several years, where they were successful in potentially accepting lower reimbursement. Some of our smaller labs, unfortunately, have not been as successful in getting that, being able to negotiate higher rates. And so we've seen that drive down in the contracts and the reimbursement from our commercial payers. So again, the argument has been for more applicable labs to be able to report, so there was a more comparable data. If in reviewing managed care contracts, with our pathology groups, we're hospital-based, we're successful in getting better contracts versus independent labs, again, are compared to what Quest and LabCorp are getting and successful in accepting. So again, NILA continues to push back on the latest MedPAC report, noting that 0.7% of laboratories paid under Medicare Part B on the clinical lab fee schedule reported applicable data to CMS. So again, we're not looking at the true the true data set that should be included to come up with reasonable reimbursement for the clinical lab fee schedule. And that's been the argument. And so, our hope is that there's continued voice, and I know NILA is continuing to fight on this, continued voice for our laboratories and pathology groups that are continuing to have to submit this data and be subject to the reductions based on the data that's provided. All right, Josh, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Ann. So I want to talk about consumer price index for a moment and how it relates to laboratories. In the lab industry, we're in very precarious times. Networks are continuing to narrow or completely exclude laboratories from participating. Our employees continue to want more money in their salary, as they should, for being good workers. And our costs continue to rise. And when you look at something like the consumer price index, you can see up here that overall, this is a July consumer price index. Overall consumer price index is now at 5.4%, typically higher than what I'm used to seeing in around the 3 to 3.5%. But that's because we're in inflationary times, as most of you know from reading in the newspaper. And then specifically in medical care services down here, you see it's up 0.8%, which is lower than the 5.4, but relatively speaking, because the cost of healthcare, if it were at 5.4, would be at dangerously high levels. So prices continue to rise. Employees want more money, and we as labs and pathologists are sometimes being excluded from networks from being paid.